In the vast reaches of space, where the stars stretch out endlessly, and the void hums with ancient energies, the dominion of Zeoth ruled supreme, its empire spanning hundreds of galaxies, a force of unimaginable power. The Zeoth had conquered countless civilizations, their fleets unstoppable, their weapons unmatched. But now something had changed. A signal from a small and seemingly insignificant world had pierced their defenses. Something was stirring in the depths of space. At first, the signal seemed like nothing more than a strange anomaly, a flicker in the cosmic sea barely noticeable, but it was persistent, its pattern unlike anything they had encountered before. The Dominion's top scientists were tasked with investigating, and what they uncovered shook them to their core. The signal was not random. It was a message, a call from a planet known as Earth, a planet located on the edge of a forgotten star system in a distant corner of the galaxy. The Council of the Dominion convened immediately. The Grand Chamber was silent except for the hum of ancient machinery as the leaders of the Empire gathered, their minds focused on the glowing map of the galaxy displayed before them. The image of Earth appeared small and blue, suspended in the cold emptiness of space, and yet the signal it sent out was clear, too clear to ignore. High Commander Zalrith stood at the center of the chamber, his cold gaze sweeping over the council. The members of the ruling elite, the ones who shaped the future of the entire empire. With a single command, his voice was the only sound breaking the silence, a low and measured tone, as he spoke of the message Earth had sent, of the strange power it might hold, and of the threat it represented. "We cannot ignore this threat," Zalrith said, his words cutting through the tension. His fingers hovered over a control panel. As he studied the data, the signal is unlike anything we have encountered before. These humans have managed to send us a warning. They know we are coming, and they are not afraid. His words caused a stir among the council, the room filled with murmurs of disbelief. How could a primitive world like Earth know of the Dominion? How could a race so young recognize the danger? And yet there it was, the undeniable evidence of their knowledge of the Empire. The council's voices rose in agitation. How could this small blue planet possibly pose a threat to their empire? Their ships could crush Earth with ease, their weapons could erase its cities in a heartbeat. But there was something else, something in the data that made even the most hardened Zeoth commanders uneasy. For centuries, the Dominion had expanded without fear. No species had ever truly challenged them. Their enemies had either been crushed or assimilated, but Earth was different. The humans had a history of fighting back against overwhelming odds. They had survived wars, plagues, and disasters that would have wiped out lesser civilizations. Their history was written in blood and fire, and it was that very resilience that now haunted the Dominion. Zalrith turned to the council, his expression hard as stone. "We cannot afford to underestimate them," he warned. "Earth may seem weak, but their will to survive is formidable. If we allow them to grow unchecked, they could become a danger to us all." The decision was made then and there. The fleet would be sent to Earth to investigate and eliminate the threat before it could reach its full potential. But there was one more thing that none of them could have anticipated. A relic of the Dominion's past, an outcast explorer named Varric, had once ventured to Earth centuries ago, and had returned with a warning of his own. That warning now seemed more relevant than ever, and would be the catalyst for the events that would follow. The council chamber grew colder as Zalrith's words settled over the room like a shroud of impending doom. The decision had been made, but the sense of unease lingered in the air like a storm waiting to break. No one questioned the power of the Dominion, but a growing tension whispered in the back of their minds. What if Earth was unlike anything they had ever encountered before? What if humanity truly had the strength to defy them? Commander Zalrith stood before the council, a towering figure whose eyes glinted with the cold certainty of one who had witnessed the fall of entire worlds. His voice was calm, but filled with an authority that demanded respect. "We must act quickly," he said. "Earth is already aware of our presence, and their response to our signal proves they are not as primitive as we believed. They have adapted their technology in ways we did not expect. If we hesitate, even for a moment, they could unite and become a serious threat to the Empire." His words cut through the murmurs of the council like a blade. But not everyone shared his certainty. Among the assembly sat Rilana, a high-ranking diplomat who had spent decades navigating the delicate politics of intergalactic relations. She listened intently to Zalrith's assessment, But something about it didn't sit right with her. She had studied countless species and civilizations throughout her long career, and there was one thing she knew to be true: not every threat was as simple as it seemed. "Zalrith, you are certain of this?" she asked, her voice measured but tinged with concern. She had never seen him so sure of a mission, and that in itself made her wary. The commander turned to her with unwavering confidence. "Earth's history is a tapestry of conflict," he said. "The humans have fought endless wars with each other, and yet they survive against all odds. This is not just a question of strength. It is their will to endure that makes them dangerous." But Rilana's mind raced back to something she had heard during her early days in the Dominion service, a story passed down among the old ones, a story about an explorer who had once ventured to this very planet over a century ago. Peric. She whispered his name more to herself than anyone else. Zalrith's expression darkened at the mention of the name. Varric had been an outcast, a lone explorer who had sought to uncover the mysteries of the galaxy, but his report on Earth had been dismissed as nothing more than fantasy or paranoia. His words were buried in the archives as irrelevant, and his departure from the Dominion was swift and final. But the story had always bothered Rilana. She had read Varric's report in secret during her early years, and there was one detail that had always stayed with her, something that made her believe he might have seen something the rest of the Dominion had missed. Earth was not a world to be ignored. He had said in his final report, humanity had a fire in them, a fire that would never be extinguished, and one day it would burn brighter than any of us could understand. She had thought it a foolish sentiment back then, the ravings of a disillusioned explorer who had gone too far, but now, with Zalrith's unwavering stance and the sudden urgency of the situation, Rilana couldn't help but wonder if there was more to Earth than met the eye. The council room grew heavy with tension as the members processed her words. Varric's warning had been dismissed long ago, but in the wake of Earth's discovery, his words seemed to echo louder than ever. The question now wasn't whether to destroy Earth, it was whether the Dominion was ready to face something that might not be so easily crushed. Zalrith paced before the council, his fists clenched in frustration. "Earth cannot be allowed to grow stronger," he said. "We must strike swiftly and decisively. We cannot afford to let them unite." But Rilana's voice cut through his certainty. "Once more, there is something more here, Zalrith," she said. "Earth's will to survive is unlike anything we have seen before. They have fought wars against each other, yet they remain unbroken. Perhaps it is time we consider a different approach." The room fell silent as the weight of her words hung in the air. Could it be possible that Earth held something more than just a threat, perhaps a key to the future, something the Dominion could never have imagined? On Earth, the first signs of the Dominion's presence were subtle but undeniable. It began with a strange energy pulse, a wave that rippled through the atmosphere, disrupting satellites and creating anomalies in communication systems around the globe. No one understood the source at first, and most assumed it was a glitch or an atmospheric phenomenon. But Kiara Morrow was different. Kiara was a hacker, an expert in deciphering encrypted data and finding patterns where others saw chaos. She was a quiet presence in the global tech community, known only by a few for her uncanny ability to break into secure systems and unravel mysteries that seemed impenetrable. When the first wave of strange disruptions hit the world's networks, she was one of the first to notice the odd signatures in the data. It didn't take long for her to connect the dots. Her screen flashed as the anomaly revealed a pattern. Something was deliberately disrupting the global grid, and though the initial scan showed nothing abnormal, Kiara's instincts told her there was something more buried deep in the signal, hidden beneath layers of false data. At first she thought it was a mistake, a miscalculation, or maybe just a sophisticated cyber attack. But as she dug deeper, the reality began to emerge. The strange pulse she was tracking wasn't just a localized interference. It was coming from space, far beyond Earth's orbit, and its signals carried a precise, deliberate pattern. She knew she had to move fast. Kiara's heart raced as she accessed a secure government database, one that had been quarantined by global defense agencies. It was here that she found the data that confirmed her worst fears. The signature was unmistakable. It was an alien transmission, not just a rogue signal, but a deliberate communication from something in the depths of space. The message was short but clear, and it was not a message of peace. There was no attempt at diplomacy, no offer of trade or alliance. Instead, the transmission contained a chilling warning. Earth was being watched, Earth was being targeted, and Earth was about to face an enemy it could not comprehend. Kiera's mind raced as she tried to process the information. The implications were staggering. An alien empire was already aware of Earth's existence, and it was planning to attack. The entire world was at risk, and there was no time to waste. She immediately reached out to the most trusted contacts she had within the world's security agencies. Though reluctant at first, they listened to her warnings as she shared her findings, and together they began to piece together the puzzle. As the encrypted message was decoded, it became clear. The Zeoth Empire was coming to Earth, and they were bringing their full might. Global leaders were quickly briefed on the impending danger, though many of them were skeptical at first, dismissing it as an elaborate hoax or a momentary glitch in the system. The evidence was undeniable. The signs of an incoming fleet were becoming more apparent. Every day, strange disturbances in space were detected by the world's best telescopes, and the energy readings were off the charts. At the same time, Kiera's warnings spread quickly among underground tech circles and shadow networks across the world. She had no choice but to trust a select few, those who had the skills to help her and the resources to make sure the planet was ready for what was coming. She began working tirelessly to decrypt any additional information from the alien transmissions as world governments scrambled to prepare for what they still didn't fully understand. Meanwhile, a strange sense of unity began to form among the global population. Driven by an instinctual need to survive, humanity's unyielding nature was becoming apparent once more across every continent. People began to see the gravity of their situation, and in response, many nations began to share resources and intelligence for the first time in decades. As the days passed, Kiera's role became central to a growing resistance movement, one that wasn't led by any single nation, but by the collective will of all of Earth's people, desperate to defend their home and survive whatever the Zeoth Empire had in store. In the face of imminent destruction, humanity had no choice but to fight back together, even if they were unsure how they could possibly overcome a force as powerful as the Dominion. As the Dominion's fleet drew closer, Earth's global response shifted from panic to purpose. In the span of days, the fragmented, divided world that had struggled with its own issues, wars, ideologies, and competition for resources suddenly found a common enemy, and something remarkable began to happen. Humanity united. People across continents, in the most unlikely of places, began setting aside their differences, knowing that survival meant cooperation. Kiera Morrow, once just a lone hacker, became an instrumental figure in this newfound global alliance. Her hacking skills, sharp intellect, and unyielding drive made her an indispensable member of a high-level task force formed by the world's leaders. Governments, once reticent to share resources, now pooled everything they had into creating a unified defense against the alien threat. Military leaders, scientists, engineers, and civilians all joined together, focused on one singular goal: survival. The United Nations, once a fractured entity, unable to broker long-term peace, found itself suddenly at the center of world unity. Nations with long histories of conflict, rivals, former enemies, now exchanged intelligence, technology, and manpower. The building blocks for a united Earth were forming, and the pace was dizzying. Within weeks, Earth was no longer divided by political lines, but was instead focused on creating a collective, singular force to oppose the coming invasion. But it was not without difficulty. The planet's resources were limited, and not all countries had the technological advantage that others did. The world's wealthiest nations, with their advanced military tech and high-end research centers, led the charge, but they quickly realized they could not do it alone. The knowledge of Earth's lesser-known regions, places once ignored, became invaluable. Ancient military tactics were combined with cutting-edge technology, human ingenuity pushing the limits of what was possible. Kiera worked tirelessly with the world's best and brightest, translating the decoded alien data into usable information. She and a small team of experts, engineers, military strategists, and linguists began to reverse engineer the alien tech that had been captured during the earlier reconnaissance. The Zeoth's advanced technology, once thought impenetrable, was slowly being adapted and understood. Earth was building weapons and defenses in real time, racing against the clock. The most significant breakthrough came when Kira, working with a group of military engineers, succeeded in adapting a piece of alien weaponry into a prototype defensive shield. It was a risky move, one that could fail spectacularly, but the first tests proved promising. The shield, though imperfect, could block the devastating energy beams the Zeoth would use to destroy cities and entire military fleets. Humanity had taken its first step in fighting back. But time was not on their side. Earth's military leaders now faced a harsh reality. The alien fleet was only days away, and despite the rapid technological advancements, the defenses in place were still inadequate for the scale of the coming invasion. The fleet, vast and technologically superior, would arrive soon. Earth had no choice but to prepare for an all-out assault. Kara's voice echoed in the global strategy meetings, now conducted through advanced communications networks that spanned the globe. Her message was simple but urgent. We need a coordinated strike. We need to hit them before they hit us. As the clock ticked down, the global task force began their preparations. Earth's nations synchronized their military operations, combining air, sea, and space forces into a single unified fleet that would intercept the Zeoth before they reached the surface. Satellites were repurposed for defense, and every nation with any form of spacefaring technology was mobilized. The world's leaders, once separated by deep divides, now stood together, united by the one thing they had never shared before: a single vision for Earth's survival. The once impossible dream of a unified world was now a reality, forged in the heat of an impending catastrophe. But still, even with all the cooperation and technology at their disposal, no one knew how to defeat an empire as powerful as the Zeoth. The odds were stacked against them, and Kira knew better than anyone. Earth's survival hinged on more than just advanced technology. It would take every ounce of human creativity, resilience, and most of all, willpower to stand against an empire that had dominated the stars for centuries. The Dominion fleet arrived as the world braced itself. For weeks, Earth's defenses had been hurriedly constructed, relying on hastily assembled coalitions of military units and makeshift technologies. Kara Morrow stood at the forefront of this unprecedented effort, coordinating the world's most advanced minds. Their work had been their salvation, but now the true test was about to begin. In the cold expanse of space, the Zeoth fleet stretched like a shadow, an impenetrable wall of metallic behemoths that glinted in the sunlight of the distant stars. They were here, and Earth had only one chance to stop them. The moment the fleet came into orbit, it was clear that the Zeoth did not see Earth as a true threat. Their ships were positioned with arrogant ease, hovering above the planet as if Earth's defenses were mere inconveniences. Kara watched from a command center, her eyes glued to the data streams as the first wave of enemy fire crackled through space, sending shockwaves through Earth's atmosphere. To the Dominion, Earth was just another primitive world, ripe for conquest. But what they underestimated was the one thing that no alien empire had ever truly accounted for: the unpredictable, often illogical nature of humanity's will to fight. The first strike came in the form of an orbital bombardment. Massive energy beams lanced down, striking Earth's surface with terrifying precision. Entire cities in vulnerable regions were obliterated in a matter of seconds. But the humans had expected this, and their first lines of defense, the experimental energy shields, activated just in time to halt much of the damage. Kira had been part of the team that had worked to perfect them, and now they were saving lives. The energy shields held against the initial onslaught, but it was clear that Earth had only a few moments before the Dominion shifted to more devastating tactics. Earth's space forces, a patchwork coalition of military craft, came into play, fighting tooth and nail against the invaders. Ships that had once only ever navigated Earth's orbit were now engaged in combat with technologically superior warships, weapons clashing in a dazzling display of firepower. Though they were outmatched in every regard, the human fleet fought like a cornered animal, unwilling to give in. And then came the unexpected. While Earth's defenses were holding for the moment, humanity's ingenuity had been underestimated. Kira's team had taken alien technology and repurposed it. What had once been a devastating weapon of the Zeoth was now turned against them. A newly modified pulse weapon was deployed, and to the surprise of the Zeoth, it struck one of their smaller dreadnoughts with precision and devastating force. The dreadnought's shields flickered, then cracked as its hull erupted in a shower of sparks. It was the first real blow to the Dominion fleet, a signal that Earth was not as helpless as they had thought. But even as this victory sparked hope across Earth's forces, the Zeoth were quick to retaliate. A new wave of destruction descended, this time targeting Earth's power plants and communication hubs. Cities that had been shielded from the first barrage now faced the true might of the Dominion's weapons. Earth's forces scrambled to defend against the onslaught, but the Dominion had begun to show their true superiority. The human response, however, was unrelenting. Though the shields were failing and their forces were rapidly dwindling, Kira saw something on her screens that she hadn't anticipated. The human spirit, a force of its own, was rising to the occasion. Every corner of the planet was alight with resistance. Every nation, from the richest to the most impoverished, had taken to the skies and to the ground, pushing the Dominion back in whatever way they could. Even civilian groups, armed with nothing but basic weapons and a defiant will to survive, staged attacks against Dominion outposts. On Earth, there was no surrender. The loss of entire cities and millions of lives fueled their rage, but also their unity. Kira watched as each new wave of destruction became a rallying cry for humanity. People who had once seen each other as rivals now fought side by side. Nations that had never shared anything were now allies in the most literal sense of the word. In space, the battle raged on, but a subtle shift was beginning. The Zeoth had never encountered a species so determined to fight for its survival, and though their fleet was vast and their weapons powerful, Earth's resilience could not be ignored. Kira felt a surge of hope. Against all odds, humanity had shown the Dominion something they had never expected. They were no longer just a primitive species. They were a force that could be reckoned with. As the days passed and Earth's resistance grew stronger, the Dominion began to feel the shift, an undercurrent of unease that slowly seeped through their ranks. They had underestimated humanity, assuming that a few blows to Earth's surface would shatter the will of its people, forcing them into submission. Instead, they had stirred something far more dangerous, an unbreakable resolve. The Zeoth began to realize, albeit too late, that this war would not be as easy as they had anticipated. Kira Morrow stood at the heart of Earth's defense efforts, tirelessly coordinating between the military leaders, scientists, and engineers. The pulse weapon they had captured from the Dominion's fleet and adapted was now Earth's greatest hope, but it was not enough on its own. They needed more technology, more intelligence, more firepower, and they needed it fast. Working with an international coalition of engineers, Kira pushed for the development of a new kind of weapon, one that could deal a decisive blow to the Zeoth motherships, the immense command vessels that loomed above Earth's atmosphere. These ships were the core of the Dominion's fleet, and without them, the entire invasion force would be thrown into disarray. But the motherships were nearly impervious to all but the most advanced of weapons. It would take everything they had, and more, to bring them down. Meanwhile, the Zeoth commanders, once confident in their victory, began to realize they had underestimated their adversary. The pulse weapon that had struck one of their dreadnoughts had dealt more damage than they had been willing to admit. The humans had repurposed their own technology and turned it against them, and the Zeoth, for the first time in centuries, were no longer invincible. On Earth, the fight raged on. Cities were in ruins, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of burning debris and the distant sounds of explosions. Yet there was a strange sense of unity among the people, a deep-rooted determination that pushed them to keep fighting. From the streets of New York to the heart of Beijing, soldiers and civilians alike joined forces, battling through the devastation with a shared purpose. People who had never met, never spoken, now fought side by side as one cohesive force. Kiera's team had worked relentlessly, developing new technologies in record time, but even they knew that no weapon would be enough to guarantee victory. Earth's defense was not just about military might. It was about the spirit of humanity, the fierce will to survive that burned brighter with each passing hour. The Zeoth, for all their technological superiority, had never encountered a species driven by such a powerful desire to protect their home. Back in space, the battle had escalated. The Zeoth had unleashed their full might, sending wave after wave of energy blasts toward Earth's surface. But the human defenses, though strained, held steady. The shields were holding, and the pulse weapons were beginning to land more effectively. The Zeoth fleet, once confident and terrifying, was beginning to show signs of wear. Ships that had been considered invulnerable were now starting to fall, one by one. For the first time, the Dominion felt the sting of their own arrogance. But even as Earth's forces gained ground, the Dominion had one last card to play. A devastating weapon hidden in the depths of their largest mothership, a weapon capable of erasing entire continents with a single strike. It was their final move, their ultimate plan to ensure that Earth could not rise again. And the Zeoth fleet was preparing to launch it. Kiera's heart pounded in her chest as she received the intelligence report. The weapon was coming, and if they didn't stop it, everything they had fought for would be lost. She knew this would be their last chance to turn the tide for good. Earth's survival depended on one final strike, a strike that would be humanity's most daring, most desperate move yet. With no time to waste, Kiera's team worked in overdrive, sending out a message to every surviving human fleet. The plan was simple, but fraught with danger. The most advanced ships, equipped with Earth's newly adapted weapons, would make a direct assault on the Zeoth mothership, targeting its core and the massive weapon hidden within. But this mission would require more than just skill. It would require a willingness to sacrifice everything. As Earth's fleet mobilized for the final assault, Kiera watched the data streams, knowing that no matter what happened, the world would never be the same again. This was their final stand. The moment of truth had arrived. The Dominion's massive mothership, the heart of their entire invasion force, loomed high above Earth, casting a shadow over the planet below. Kiera Morrow stood in the operations center, staring at the sprawling map of the battlefield. Her hands trembled slightly, but her mind was focused. She had seen the reports. Earth's forces were holding, but the Dominion's final weapon was almost ready to fire. If it unleashed its full power, it would obliterate everything they had fought for. "Time is running out," Kiera muttered under her breath, her voice barely audible above the hum of the command center. She watched as Earth's fleet prepared for the most dangerous mission humanity had ever attempted. The assault on the Zeoth mothership would be a suicide mission for many of them. It was a gamble that could cost the lives of countless brave souls. But there was no other choice. The entire planet hung in the balance. "We have one shot at this," Kiera said, her voice now steady as she addressed the command staff around her. "Our fleet needs to breach the outer defenses of the mothership, penetrate its core, and destroy the weapon. If we fail, we lose everything." The plan was simple but nearly impossible. The humans had managed to develop a new kind of weapon that could pierce the Zeoth's nearly impenetrable shields. A modified pulse cannon, it would be their best hope of creating a breach in the mothership's defenses. Once that breach was made, Earth's ships would swarm the mothership, trying to disable the weapon before it could be launched. But there was no certainty. The Zeoth had already begun their countdown, and their final weapon, a cataclysmic energy cannon capable of vaporizing entire continents, was moments away from activation. Earth's fleets were assembling, poised to launch. But time was against them. The Zeoth, their arrogance unshaken even now, had made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated the fire in humanity's heart. "Are the fleets ready?" Kira asked, turning to the admiral in charge of Earth's space forces. The admiral nodded, his face grim but determined. "We're ready, Kira," he said. "Every ship, every soldier is prepared. The assault will begin on your mark." Kira's heart pounded. This was the moment she had been preparing for. This was everything. She could feel the weight of every life on Earth pressing down on her. She had never imagined that it would come to this, but now she had no choice. They had to win. "Launch the assault," Kira said firmly. Her voice was steady, but inside, the nerves were raw. For Earth. The command was sent, and Earth's fleet sprang into action. Dozens of ships, from fighter crafts to massive warships, rocketed into the void, their engines flaring brightly against the blackness of space. They were heading straight for the heart of the Zeoth mothership, a target so daunting that many of the pilots knew they would never make it back. Yet, they flew without hesitation. For Earth, for survival. The Zeoth were not prepared for the sheer ferocity of the human assault. The modified pulse cannons fired first, striking the mothership's outer shields with a thunderous roar. The shields flickered but held, absorbing the full impact. But the humans did not falter. As the pulse cannons continued to fire, Earth's fighters swooped in, their lasers lashing out, targeting smaller ships and defense platforms surrounding the mothership. The Zeoth responded quickly, launching counterattacks in a bid to destroy Earth's forces, but humanity was quick and adaptive. Fighters weaved through blasts, using the debris from destroyed ships as cover. It was chaos, fire, and explosions filling the space between the ships. But amid the madness, Earth's forces pressed on. "We're in," came the voice of the lead pilot, his voice crackling over the comms. "We've breached the outer hull, proceeding to core." Kira's heart leaped. The first phase had been successful. The breach in the hull had been made. Now they had to make it to the core of the mothership, where the weapon was housed. Time was ticking down, and the Zeoth were growing desperate. Their reinforcements were coming, but Earth's fighters were already inside, closing in on their target. The final weapon was nearing activation. Its energy was building, surging toward its apex. Kira watched the countdown on her screen, her breath caught in her throat. The pilots were making their way through the corridors of the mothership, weaving through halls and chambers where the very heart of the Zeoth fleet pulsed with power. Almost there came the voice of another pilot. "We're going to take it down." And then, just as the countdown reached its final moments, a brilliant burst of light filled the screen, blinding Kira for an instant. The pulse cannon had struck its target, the heart of the Dominion mothership. The weapon, the last hope for the Zeoth, began to unravel, its energy dissipating in a violent eruption. The mothership shuddered violently, and with a final resounding crash, it exploded into a dazzling display of light, signaling the beginning of the end for the Dominion's invasion force. Earth had won. But the price had been high. Many had sacrificed everything. As the dust settled, Kira knew this was only the beginning of the true journey, for Earth and for humanity. The universe had never known a force like humanity. The final strike on the Zeoth mothership had been the turning point, but it had come at a devastating cost. Earth's fleet, though victorious, had been decimated. The majority of the pilots, soldiers, and commanders who had risked everything to destroy the Dominion's weapon never returned. The battle had been won, but the scars of war were etched deeply across the planet. Kira Morrow stood alone in the command center, the once bustling operations room now eerily quiet. The monitors that had once flashed with urgent information were dim, displaying the aftermath of the battle. The Zeoth fleet, without their command mothership, had fractured. Their remaining ships, disoriented and leaderless, had either retreated into deep space or been systematically destroyed by Earth's remaining forces. The invasion had been halted, but the cost of survival was heavy. Tears welled in Kira's eyes as she thought of the fallen. She had known many of them. Soldiers, engineers, civilians who had been transformed into warriors by necessity. They had come together not just as nations, but as one single, unified human race. And now, the Earth that they had fought for would never be the same again. The world they had saved was one of ruin and rubble, but it was theirs. The first few days after the final battle had been a blur. The initial relief of survival had quickly turned to mourning, then to rebuilding. The death toll from the invasion, both in terms of lives lost and cities reduced to ash, was staggering. Entire regions were unrecognizable, scorched by the energy blasts of the Dominion's weapon. The Zeoth had wreaked havoc, but humanity had fought back with a strength they had never before tapped into. Kira knew the recovery would take years, perhaps decades, but humanity's resilience, once again, would be their greatest asset. They had fought not for conquest, not for power, but for their homes, their families, their way of life. And they had won. Across the world, the remains of Earth's military forces began their slow return. Ships limped back to their home planets, survivors hailed as heroes. The bond that had formed between nations during the war was not one easily broken. For the first time in history, humanity was united, not by treaties or politics, but by the bloodshed and sacrifices shared by every corner of the globe. The rebuilding process began immediately, and there was a palpable sense of optimism that perhaps, for all the destruction, this could mark the beginning of a new era for Earth. Kiera found herself standing on a balcony overlooking the city of New York, which had been hit hardest during the invasion. The once proud skyline was now a jagged silhouette against the orange and purple sky, but the sounds of recovery were filling the air. Engineers, workers, and volunteers, humanity's greatest asset, were already at work. People were building again, from the ground up, brick by brick. The city would rise from the ashes, just as Earth would rise from the devastation. A hand landed gently on her shoulder, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Admiral Harris, the last of the military leaders she trusted, his face tired but resolute. "We did it," he said softly, a somber smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "It's over." Kira nodded, her heart heavy. "It's over, but it's only just begun." Together, they stood in silence, watching as humanity, in all its perseverance and determination, began to rebuild what had been lost. There was no victory parade, no grand speeches. There was only the quiet, steadfast resolve to move forward. The world had been forever changed, not by the technology of the Zeoth, but by the strength of the human spirit. And as Earth looked up to the stars once more, Kira Morrow knew that humanity had learned something that no invader could ever take from them. The universe was vast, and many more challenges would come. But now, Earth had something it never had before: a purpose, a unity, and an unyielding determination to face whatever the future held. As the last remnants of the Zeoth fleet vanished into the depths of space, Earth stood as a beacon of hope in the galaxy, a warning to any who might consider underestimating humanity again.